Hi everyone, this is the 25th of November 2018. Now just right after what we saw last week, a long consolidation, almost couple of weeks of doji patterns that I discussed in my last video, we've actually broken out of that range. So interestingly, over the weekend, what I noted was that you had a doji star in the Nifty, which means on a weekly chart, the start and the end of last week were at the same level, which shows that loss of momentum. It got recognized by the charts very late. The part is that when you actually break past either the high or the low of a doji star, you actually get a continuation signal, which is partly what we got today. Now, of course, that was on weekly chart, so you'd say you'd want that on the weekly level as well. But given that you had so many dojis on the daily chart, we have passed that upper line, which means we could have continued to form a triangle, but it's ended in what should be a ABC or a complex WXY kind of a consolidation zone. And even though, momentum indicators have whipsawed up and down, if you look at things like, rate of change, if you look at the trend line, which I discussed, we'd broken a lot of them. What ended up holding out specifically for the indices, the main indices, Nifty, of course, there were other sector indices, which I noted have actually sold off, was the moving averages themselves. So, say the 20-day moving average did not end up breaking, it ended up holding for the entire move. And so closing at a new high means that we still have trend continuation on the upside. So the next major hurdles then end up being only the trend line of all the highs at 12,300. There may be some interim resistances, but it looks like you're going to get that all-time high print in the Nifty as well. So far, you only got it for the Sensex. Now, the big question is going to be, are you going to get that breakout in the mid-cap indices itself? Because the falling trend line from 2018 highs was not surpassed. And if that happens, then it would be a very, very good sign for the broad stock market that has been in decline for so far. So this has happened despite a lot of, negative news. Like I said, I showed up the sentiment chart last time, and I discussed that, if sentiment is so bad, even after, a 1500 point rally in the Nifty, then does it really mean that, markets continue to higher because sentiment did not change? That's the contrary way of looking at it. Or are things really very, very bad and not going to get better anyway? The big trigger point, of course, for markets has been central bank intervention, at least in the US, very openly. And in our case, a clear direction that we are going to get lower rates. And so the question was, how will that rub off on financial markets? So far, it rubbed off well. And this move further indicates that negativity is getting, being absorbed. So whether it's, news like Z, for example, right at the, end of last week, you had Z selling off its stake. That means that the negativity in that stock also somewhere going away. If you had promoters that had pledged shares, moving out of the system, just like you had, funding for Yes Bank before it sold off sharply. But if you get that change in management and you get new funding, then do things really change? Now, one of the interesting charts I posted today, and this one's from the international market, you still continue to hear about this bank, which is Deutsche Bank. And similar to, our own event, you hear about, whether Deutsche Bank is going to shut down and it's going to cause everything to go into a mess. And you probably heard that story 100 times in the last, 5 to 6 years or 10 years. And still, that has not happened, but the stock is already down maybe over 90%. So when you look at this chart, what you see is an ABC decline where wave C can be marked as 5 A's. You cannot confirm that the fifth is over, but that's very similar to all the other Indian charts that I've discussed, and these sold off in these, panicked out stories where you're actually getting, some kind of news flow where there's some bailout or some, structural change taking place. And it depends really when the market starts discounting it. So I really started to question, why not the same for Deutsche Bank? It's been around long enough. They've tried to keep it alive. So it's not given you the bad news that you were waiting for. And now that ABC is almost done, if I go by this chart, till it really reverses. And it's possible it reverses on some kind of news of, either it getting merged with some other bank, or it getting, bailed out by somebody, or some funding coming in, or something that we can't see. And it's while you can't see it now, think of, Citibank. It was looking like it's going to shut down at $1, and it ended up getting funding from the Saudi prince, and then it's still around today, 10 years later. So that's what ends up happening. Will it happen in the case of Deutsche Bank? Well, you have a setup for something to complete, for this chart to end something. If it had to shut down it, I think by the time you end wave 5 of C, you should have already seen it shut down. That's my case in most of these announcements, that if the worst had to happen, it's already happened in price, and so should have been announced. And if it hasn't, then maybe something else is going on behind the scenario. So I think that's what I'll leave you with in terms of thoughts. We continue to get news flows which may be negative, but what you'll really look forward to next from here on will be what the RBI ends up doing in its next policy meeting. Is it going to be 25 bips rate cut? It is still going to wait, or will they have enough data from the monsoon season on the in terms of their production predictions to really be able to say that they can finally do more? Because we've already heard a lot of crib about real interest rates being too high in India, and that needs to adjust, and probably they could do that. What is not yet happening is spreads, that is the spread between the lending rate and the borrowing rates for a lot of the lower rated buyers not really coming down. I don't know how they're going to sort that. They need to, but one pressure point is really continuing to pull down the base rate. So let's see whether that happens and to what extent. That's all for you from today. Thank you.